Welcome to the Class Apart. I'm your host, Arjun. Thank you for joining me as I embark upon a journey across the world of higher education. Each episode, we'll discover exciting alumni experiences, gain industry insights with various stakeholders, and explore the ever-changing landscapes of global learning. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of The Class Apart. For all of those who have subscribed and have been listening to the content that has been released till now, thank you very much. I really hope you enjoyed today's content as well. For those of you that are listening for the first time, welcome to the show. Please do hit that subscribe button and show the love if you do like the content. Today's episode is pretty cool, I think. I won't get into too many details before the actual conversation starts, but I do have one disclaimer. I am a big fan of this guy's career trajectory. The way he has powered through and his relentless pursuit to what he wants to accomplish is definitely inspiring. But without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Tushar Aggarwal. Hi Tushar, how's it going?
Good, Arjun. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
Good. Thank you for accepting the request. Yeah, I mean, your journey into higher education and after that, I mean, I don't think I've kept it a secret. I really like your career trajectory and what you've been doing in and outside the university. So, I mean, definitely thank you for coming on the show. It should be a good conversation. Just before we get started, just for all the listeners, I just wanted to ask, why did you decide to pursue an international education and from which institution?
Yeah. So I guess, I could start off, with a very brief introduction as well. So for the listeners, Arjun and I went to the same high school. And so when I was graduating in 2010, I was actually, not taking up sciences in school, but I wasn't, 100% sure what I wanted to study. And I guess, one of the key reasons for, wanting to, study overseas was to have that relative flexibility in terms of, switching and taking a little bit more time. Deciding my major. I ended up going to Nanyang Tech University, NTU, in Singapore. And although Singapore is not, very well known for its, flexibility, I actually ended up, doing that. So it started off, taking off kind of general engineering courses and realized that I was a little out of depth. and that's not where my interests lied as well. And so kind of one semester in, moved over to the dark side and started taking up business courses. So yeah, I think, also in general, outside of that flexibility, it was also about, trying to, had gone on an exchange program when I was in high school. And that had allowed me to, meet people from, so many different backgrounds, nationalities, cultures at a very young age. And that was a very nice experience. So, wanted to kind of build up on that and immerse myself in a very, very cosmopolitan city that has people from all around the world. And so that was why Singapore as well.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny that you went to NTU Nanyang, because I think I went to NTU as well, but Nottingham Trent University in the UK.
Right.
So, as you mentioned, you kind of studied sciences in high school, class 11 and 12, and then you went on to kind of study engineering programs and didn't quite feel that fit. How was the transition from engineering programs to the business programs at NTU in Singapore?
Yeah. So, NTU and the Singapore education system is modeled on the British education system, which is not known for its flexibility either.
Definitely.
So it was a bit of a struggle, but I had spoke to the dean in terms of what my troubles were, and he was decently understanding and kind of laid down the path. I mean, he sort of gave me steps in terms of how I should go about making that transition. So from an administrative perspective, I had a little bit of support, but I think in terms of just picking up, the actual, like course material and things like that, it wasn't, too much of a challenge. I always, my personal focus was always, I was decent in academics, but I, didn't want to study that's more like things that are more applicable in the real world. If I could go back, I would obviously, now, having gotten the exposure that I have now, I would obviously study a few things that I think are even more relevant than taking some of those business courses. But, it was, the transition was, fairly smooth apart from the administrative hoops that I had to jump through.
Yeah. So if we zoom out a little bit and kind of look at it from a macro perspective about your time in Singapore and at NTU, did the university you go to meet your expectations?
So, when I was in high school, I was, you have an idea of what university and college is like. And, I was always more inclined to go to North America for university, but ended up, due to multiple factors and the decisions that I took, ended up, going to Singapore. And, to be very honest and frank, I did not know too much what to expect from Singapore as a city and also NTU as a university. I think it was definitely overwhelming, to begin with, especially the coursework and coming out of that, boarding school environment, where you're, constantly surrounded by friends and suddenly, you're out in a big university amongst, thousands of students on a big campus. And so, that, definitely took a while to kind of get used to. I think all in all, the program was good. I think in terms of the people, I think it's more of a function of, Singapore. I think in terms of, that challenge that I was expecting, was not that. I mean, it was pretty much, smooth sailing, which is, I guess, not a bad thing, but yeah, that I guess that growth in class, or maybe that growth doesn't happen in class. It just happens outside of class. But I didn't think it was, too challenging, of an environment and that, that intellectual challenge was missing. But I think, it was definitely, a great experience, all in all. And I think, in terms of decision making, I guess some of the audience may be deciding, where to study. I think the city has a big role to play, as does the university, but the city where the university is located, plays a big role. So from that perspective, in hindsight, I didn't think about it, but in hindsight, Singapore was a great decision, obviously because, East Asia coming up and those kinds of things, the opportunities I had, the connections that I made in Singapore, would have been, a little bit more difficult in other parts of the world.
Yeah, definitely. So, as you mentioned, there was a bit of an adjustment that you had to make when you went to Singapore and you had to kind of figure your way around things. So considering the fact, I mean, we both went to the same school and we're both technically from Dehradun, so school to home was technically a half an hour drive away. Finding yourself kind of in Singapore, international waters, pretty much there's almost nobody that you know of there. Where were some of the places that you struggled and kind of how did you manage to overcome them?
Yeah, so I mean, on the academic front, I've already spoken about it. I felt like I just didn't have the inclination to study some of the engineering courses, and so that was definitely a huge struggle for me in the first semester. And also one of the conditions that the dean had laid down for me to be able to transition to the business school was to do well in those engineering courses, which was
Oh, wow.
a little bit strange because it's something that you want to get out of, but you have to do well to be able to do something that you want to do. But anyway, I mean, it was I had some smart friends who helped me out, and so yeah, that was definitely a struggle. I think outside of academics, I think the other struggle was just like little things, right? Like at that point, like in 2010, you would check your email, but like not that frequently.
Yeah.
And so just just it's a decade ago, right? And like we were not that comfortable using technology in general, right? Because we didn't have phones and laptops and things like that in school, and just sending emails to each other was, it was still not that big yet, which it was, I think, internationally. And so you would get all these like email announcements, and it was, so broad and generic that I was, kind of pretty lost in the first year because you're getting all these emails, but I wouldn't check them, or even if I did check them, then, I wouldn't know like what to, like it was, I just felt like it was being blasted out to like 10,000 people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest adjustment, right? Just knowing that you're such a small piece in the university and then finding your place within it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that took a while, but yeah, I mean, over a period of time, started playing, a few sports, and got involved in some extracurriculars, and then, that's how I kind of found my footing and people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely resonate with the point that with the phones and everything moving digitally. I remember we weren't technically allowed phones in school. I won't elaborate further on that, but yeah, even after leaving, you have your calendar online, you have your emails online, all of your professors. I mean, I'm used to kind of just, bumping into teachers while walking around school, and all of a sudden, like, I have to make an email appointment to meet a professor when going to university.
Right.
Social interaction.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just living with your friends, and then all of a sudden you have to kind of, I mean, I didn't think I started using WhatsApp till like 2013 or 2012 or something. Before that, it was BlackBerry Messenger?
Same. Yeah.
So yeah, just the whole transition to be able to kind of cope up with everything moving digitally, that was definitely a task. So how was the university's support system? I mean, say with accommodation, with maybe financial support, with academic support. You've obviously mentioned that the dean of the business school was definitely very proactive and helpful in allowing the transition from engineering to business. But the other facilities, the accommodation facilities and academic support, how was that?
I mean, I think, if NQ is like a, full-fledged university with like, I think 25,000 students or so. So, in general, they have all their processes and, things like that in place. It was a beautiful campus, with all the facilities and those kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, again, I guess, like you pointed, and I don't know if, some of the audience, maybe a little bit younger, and cannot relate to these issues. And I think obviously our upbringing was very unique, but in general, yeah, I think just having to reach out to people to set up those appointments, so I think the support system was there, but like I didn't use it that well.
Yeah.
And I guess, that's something for, I guess, yeah, it's what you make of it, right? Rather than what's available. The 20 million things you can do, at a university, and but yeah, it's just about what you make of it. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, this overall, support system was great. I mean, lots of different, clubs and societies that you could be part of. Sports is a big thing. I was living in a, there were, I think, 16 halls of residences, and each hall had its own, like, committees and subcommittees for different things, and a lot of rivalry between the different halls. And so, yeah, those kinds of things, were all there. It just, took me a while to,
Yeah.
and also because, I think like you was doing a 3-year degree. And so, first year you're kind of lost, second year you find your footing, and third year you have to find a job. And so, your university kind of just, like, it just flew by.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, even I feel I didn't make the most out of, university itself. I had a great time, but there's always, in hindsight, there's always more that I could have done. And there's always more I could have been involved in, although I was involved in like tennis and squash and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, before going to university, what are 2 or 3 points that you would have liked to know? Like, in hindsight, this would have been handy to know before I got there.
I think the biggest is, just what I was studying. It was just, a shot in the dark, and, there was no thought process behind it. It was just, just lack of awareness. And like, I think my sister's, relatively much younger. And so in her case, I was able to kind of guide her, and there was more thought process behind, the decision making. But yeah, I think, a lot of the things that I studied, you don't really need to go to university for that. You can just, learn it if you're just curious, and you jump on the right places on the internet. But yeah, I think, like in hindsight, like for example, now I'm a founder of a tech company, And so I wish I had taken maybe more like product development related courses and design related courses and maybe some relevant engineering courses that were exciting. And yeah, so I think just that there was just there was no direction, and so one was one was definitely that. I think what else? I mean, for me, this turned out pretty well, but
Yep.
yeah, just putting more thought behind the city that you're going to, right? Like, so some people might be going to the States or the UK, and so do you want to be in Manchester or London?
Yeah.
I would pick a relatively worse university in London, but be in the heart of the city compared to being in relatively smaller cities, for example.
Yep.
Always, I mean, again, depends on what you want out of life and things like that as well, and what your like career goals are and things like that. But like I would always, or maybe the lifestyle is a little bit better in some remote locations. So I mean, that's the trade-off, right? And so making that decision, but for me there was no thought process. I just like winged it and went to Singapore. But yeah, I mean, just putting a little bit more thought process behind like the city that you're choosing. And for me, it was in hindsight a great decision, but would have been great if I'd known that before going.
So, as you mentioned earlier, you're the founder of a tech company, and I'd just like to touch upon that a little bit. So, you graduated from NTU around 2013, if I'm not wrong. And since then, you've obviously kind of developed in certain ways, had a few jobs in the middle, and now you're the founder of a tech company. If you could just elaborate more on what you do now and how university assisted you in kind of getting to where you want to be now. That's both inside and outside of the classroom. Because I'm assuming that your extracurricular activities had a lot to contribute towards where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I would say, just, I guess, even in, like, for example, in school, some of the things that you learn help you, like, run a company. But yeah, I guess, like, people management would be one. I don't think there's anything in class that you learn that I think that I'm using. It's mostly outside of class. But again, that's because maybe what I studied wasn't so relevant. So if I'd made better decisions, maybe that would have been super helpful. But yeah, I think I would say at the end of the day, yeah, I guess the people. I have just some basic stuff around like. I guess general business etiquette in terms of sending out emails, calendar invites, setting up meetings, follow up, those kinds of things. So these small
more
things,
softer skills.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. As a high level thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So what do you do now?
Yeah. So as I said, run a technology company focused on primarily within the blockchain vertical, and mostly in terms of what we're trying to do is high level classify it under the fintech space, but essentially creating digital asset exchanges. So like for the first one, our first client is a physical commodities marketplace, cross-border commodities. So facilitating the trading of high value items like large amounts of wheat, coal, copper, and which was historically done by phone calls and WhatsApp and emails, but creating an end-to-end kind of SaaS solution to manage cross-border trade, including the payment aspect. Because today as at the retail level we use Paytm or Google Pay, Phone Pay. But if you compare it to the infrastructure that exists for cross-border payments, payments at the retail level are really good, but not so good at the institutional level, where you still, for cross-border payments, wait for 2-3 days, for payments to settle via SWIFT and things like that. So yeah, essentially using blockchain technology for more, B2B and institutional use cases to try and see how some of the technology can be leveraged for, small to medium enterprises, larger corporates. Yeah.
Well, that sounds quite interesting. As always, I don't 100% get it, but I'm sure someday I'll catch up. So we've spoken about kind of the classroom and why you chose to go to Singapore. I'd like to focus a little bit now on your experiences outside of university, kind of the friends you made, the extracurricular activities you were a part of. Because I personally do believe in hobbies, religiously believe that everyone should have hobbies. And I feel Singapore has a lot to offer in that area of kind of pursuing your interests, social lives, sports, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, what did I do, or like, what was the experience like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, like I mentioned, in a more like structured format, there were, so many things you could get involved in. So I was, I know you from NTU because I was heavily involved in the film society in university.
Wow.
And just to keep getting, there was an NTU film society as well, a Nottingham Trent University Film Society as well. So I used to keep getting emails from them. But anyway, so yeah, I was involved in, a few of the, like kind of formal structured clubs and societies, including the big one was where I spent most of my time was actually the film society. And then obviously getting involved in, like the Hall of Residence was a big thing, and getting involved massively on, the executive, committee there, getting involved in sports, like squash, tennis, but also other sports, softball and a few other sports. And yeah, I think so. Singapore is very, very cosmopolitan city, melting pot for has people from all around the world, and so yeah, I think socially, and also it's super small, so it's very easy to meet people. Even though it's like a big city, but it's pretty small, and there are only three big universities, three kind of big public universities, and so you'd end up making friends from, and NTU was like really far away from the city, but really far away in Singapore context is not that far away. and there were the other two universities were a little bit more closer to the city, so you'd end up going to the city over the weekends, and form friendships, like not just within university but across the other universities that were there. And yeah, I mean, I was also fortunate in the sense that there were a few other friends from high school that were in the same university that I was in, and also in some of the other universities, and so it was much easier to kind of mingle with people, because you already had some sort of linkages.
Definitely. So I mean, just moving on to kind of like my final question, are you an advocate of international higher education? And if yes, why?
Yeah. I mean, we live in, interesting times for sure. I mean, now, if you would have asked me very frankly, with COVID hitting the world, look, I had a great experience, right? Overall, definitely the kind of exposure that I had, the kind of people that I met, the opportunities that I encountered, wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't, done that. But, and so I would, definitely recommend people to, explore that opportunity. But obviously just, education as a whole is changing, kind of from a macro perspective. And so from that perspective, it still remains to be seen, I think, from a, kind of mid to long term perspective, how education itself would evolve. But yeah, I mean, I think, for anyone, who can afford it, and, it's definitely, definitely, as the cliche goes, broadens your horizons.
Yeah, definitely.
In multiple ways.
All right. Thank you, Tushar, for coming on the show. It's been,
Thanks, Arjun, for having me.